Hello, and welcome to the Spicy Pod's Sleep Stories. I am Michael, and tonight we journey to a city where it never stops raining, and where sorrow carries its own rhythm. She has come to escape a broken heart, unaware that her tears summon storms, until she meets him. A man who collects grief from the skies. In this suspended world, every drop mirrors a heartbeat, and every moment brings them closer to a storm shared and a bond that cannot be broken. The train slid into the station like a sigh swallowed by the rain. Outside, the city shimmered beneath an endless curtain of water, its edges blurred, its lights trembling through fog. Evelyn Rain stepped onto the platform, her boots meeting the wet stone with a soft, resigned sound. The air was cool, silvered, and strange, like the inside of a dream that refused to wake. She hadn't planned to come here. The decision had formed in the hollow between heartbeats, somewhere between escape and surrender. After all, what better place for a rain elemental to disappear than in a city where the sky never cleared? Her name had once carried warmth. Now it was a secret she spoke only to the rain. She lifted her face to the drizzle, feeling the drops gather on her skin, slide down her throat, and vanish into the collar of her coat. Each droplet carried memory, his voice, a laugh that no longer belonged to her, the ghost of hands she had once trusted. The city seemed to recognize it. The rain thickened, as if it too remembered. She found a room above a quiet bookshop, where the air smelled of paper, cedar, and dust. From her window, she could see the blurred outlines of rooftops stretching into mist. The gutters sang softly, water slipping through their narrow throats. She watched it all night, the rhythm steady and unrelenting, like a heartbeat that wouldn't let her rest. In the morning, the fog was waiting for her. She wandered through narrow streets where puddles mirrored the sky. Umbrellas drifted past like dark petals, the people beneath them, faceless silhouettes. The city did not ask her name. It did not pry. It simply wept, endlessly, beautifully. By afternoon, she began to notice a pattern. When she felt hollow, the drizzle became mist. When she remembered his voice, the downpour sharpened, relentless. And when she tried to forget, truly forget, the rain stopped altogether, leaving the world breathless and still. But the stillness was worse than sorrow. It made her tremble. So she cried, quietly, without sound. The rain returned, forgiving, tender. It kissed her lashes, gathered in her palms, and slipped down to the waiting streets. Somewhere beneath the hush of water and the hum of distant traffic, she could almost hear it whisper back to her, "You are not alone." That night, as she lay in her small attic room, she listened to the steady pulse of rainfall against the glass. It sounded like the slow breathing of the earth, comforting, intimate, alive. And though she did not yet know it, someone out there was listening too. Someone who could taste the sorrow in the storm. Someone whose silver eyes had already turned toward her, drawn to the rhythm of her rain. That night, the rain deepened. It wasn't loud or violent, only endless, like a heartbeat echoing through the city's bones. Evelyn lay awake beneath her thin blanket, tracing the patterns of condensation on her window pane. The glass trembled faintly with each drop, catching the lamplight and turning it into tiny shards of silver. She closed her eyes, listening to the rhythm, and felt the world breathe through her. She thought of what she'd left behind, a love that had soured into silence, a heart she had tried to forget. But forgetting was never her gift. The rain had followed her because it always did, because she was made of it and it of her. And when she wept, the sky answered. Outside, puddles gathered along the cobblestones. The scent of wet earth rose like incense. Somewhere in the distance, thunder murmured, not a warning, but a promise. Evelyn wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the narrow balcony. The air was cool and damp, the fog soft against her skin. She lifted her face toward the heavens and let the rain trace her features, each drop a memory dissolving against her lips. Her tears mingled with the storm until she could no longer tell them apart. And then something shifted. The downpour hesitated. Just for a heartbeat, the drops hung in the air, suspended between fall and flight. The city seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn blinked, uncertain, and the pause ended as suddenly as it had come. The rain continuing its song as if nothing had changed, but she felt it, a pulse in the air, faint and electric, a presence. Down in the street, a man stood beneath a flickering lamppost, head tilted toward the sky. He didn't carry an umbrella. The rain touched him, but did not soak him. It seemed to curve around his body, sliding down invisible paths before reaching the ground. His eyes, when he finally lifted them, gleamed like molten silver. Aaron Solis had felt her sorrow long before he saw her. He had been following the storms for years, gathering their quiet grief, the taste of salt and sky. He knew when a new sadness was born, when it deepened enough to move the weather. But this was different. Her sorrow wasn't merely feeding the storm. It was the storm. From her balcony, Evelyn sensed the weight of his gaze, but could not see him clearly through the fog. Only the faint shimmer of light where he stood, as if the rain bent to watch him too. She pressed her palm to the railing, heart quickening. The rain seemed to echo it, faster, harder, as though mirroring the rhythm inside her. Below, Aaron lifted a hand and caught a single droplet on his fingertip. It shimmered, trembling like a living thing. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, the droplet froze mid-air before falling apart into mist. He whispered something into the storm, something that sounded like her name. And though she could not hear the words, Evelyn felt them ripple through the rain, soft as breath, inevitable as gravity. The city shivered. The downpour turned gentle again. And high above the streets, the rain collector had found the source of his storm. The days that followed blurred into mist and silver. The rain fell in its steady rhythm, soothing and constant. Yet something in the air had changed. Evelyn felt it in the stillness between drops, that strange pause that no longer felt like emptiness, but anticipation. She began walking more often, wandering through the rain-washed streets after dusk. The lamps glowed like softened stars, halos of light trembling in the fog. Her reflection followed her in every puddle, a ghost of a woman learning to live again. But always, behind the rhythm of her steps, she sensed another presence, not threatening, simply aware. That evening she climbed the narrow staircase that led to the roof of her building. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and wet stone, the kind of air that hummed just before lightning. From here the city looked endless, roofs dissolving into fog, chimneys exhaling soft plumes of steam. She closed her eyes, letting the drizzle settle in her hair. For a moment, peace. Then a voice, low and even, carried through the rain. You shouldn't stand so close to the edge. Evelyn's eyes opened. He was there, the man from the street, the one whose gaze she had felt without seeing. The lamplight from below caught in his silver eyes, and the rain curved around him in a quiet arc, like he existed just outside of gravity. She didn't step back. You followed me. He smiled faintly. No, I was already here. Something in his voice, deep, fluid, calm, made the air between them hum. The rain softened, drops falling slower now, like time had chosen to linger. I've seen you before, she whispered, the night the storm froze. Yes, he said. It was your sorrow that called me. Her breath caught. You make it sound like I summoned you. In a way, you did. He stepped closer, rain parting slightly as he moved. I collect what others leave behind. Grief, longing, the ache that lingers after love. It gathers in the sky, and I take it before it drowns the world. His words should have frightened her, but they didn't. Instead, they slid through her like the rain itself. Cool, deliberate, intimate, she tilted her head. And tonight, Aaron said softly, I came for your storm. The space between them thinned. Evelyn could feel the warmth of him, the subtle pull that lives somewhere between curiosity and desire. Raindrops landed on her cheek and then stopped. Just stopped. The entire rooftop stilled. The rain hung in the air, suspended like glass beads. The city lights fractured through them, scattering color across his face. He reached out, his fingertips brushing her cheek. The warmth of his skin was startling, electric, and yet impossibly gentle. "When I touch the heart of the storm," he murmured, "it listens." The world was silent but alive, breathless, waiting. Evelyn met his gaze, her voice barely a whisper. "Why me?" Arn's expression softened. "Because the rain loves you, and I follow wherever it falls." He let his hand fall away, and with that motion, the world resumed. The droplets fell once more, soft, steady, unhurried. Evelyn stepped back, her pulse unsteady, her body thrumming with a strange heat that had nothing to do with the air. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said quietly. He smiled again, but there was sadness in it. "I don't say them. The rain does." And with that, he turned and vanished into the fog, leaving her alone beneath the silver downpour, her heartbeat echoing through the rhythm of the storm. That night, the rain sounded different, slower, warmer, as though it carried someone else's breath. The rain had softened to a gentle hum, a low whisper against the cobblestones, but Evelyn could still feel the pulse of that rooftop moment lingering on her skin. Her room smelled of wet paper and cedar, but tonight it seemed infused with something more, something electric, unresolved, impossible to ignore. She didn't know when he appeared again. One moment she was staring into the fogged window, tracing the path of raindrops as they raced each other downward. And the next he was there, on the balcony, leaning casually against the railing. The silver of his eyes caught the lamplight in a way that made the rain itself seem to pause. "You didn't think I'd vanish entirely, did you?" he asked, voice low, smooth, teasing. "I didn't think," she admitted, "but I feared." He smiled faintly, as though reading the private corners of her mind. "You needn't fear here. Not tonight." Evelyn hesitated, then felt the pull she had first sensed on the rooftop. A gentle tug at her chest, her heart, her storm. "Why are you following me?" she whispered. "I don't follow," he said. "I respond. The storm speaks. And I've been listening for longer than you realize." The words were soft, but the truth in them pressed against her like the weight of wet silk. He extended a hand toward her. "Come, I want to show you something." Something in her chest tightened, and without fully understanding why, she placed her hand in his. His touch was warm, grounding, as if he had the ability to tether not only the rain but her very pulse. They moved through the city like shadows in water. Narrow streets opened into secret courtyards, abandoned rooftops glistening with rain, and alleys where the mist hung heavy, making the world feel suspended between moments. Every surface shimmered, every drop reflected light, and Evelyn realized the city itself seemed to bend around his presence. He paused at a fountain tucked into a hidden courtyard. Water spilled over the edges in a delicate cascade, pooling silently at their feet. "Here," he said, "is where the sky meets the soul, where sorrow and rain can be understood, even held." Evelyn leaned against the stone edge, the cool wetness brushing her fingers. Aaron knelt beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth through the damp night air. The rain wrapped around them, gentle, deliberate, as if granting them this stolen sanctuary. "You control it," he said softly, "even if you don't realize. Your sorrow, it calls the storm, but it can also shape it." Her pulse quickened. She didn't understand entirely, yet she felt it. The subtle bend of droplets around her fingers, the soft hush that fell where she passed. And somewhere in that realization, in the quiet intimacy of shared understanding, a new warmth began to unfurl within her. Aaron's hand brushed hers again, lightly, almost accidentally, and the air between them charged. The rain paused in a scattered lattice around their bodies, a private shiver of suspended motion. Evelyn's chest fluttered, a mix of fear and curiosity, and the first sparks of trust flickered between them. "Do you always do this?" she asked, voice low. "Lead people through secret places?" He chuckled softly. "Only those who need to see the storm differently. Only those whose hearts speak to it." Her fingers brushed his, intentionally this time, testing the pull. The rain around them quivered, responding, attentive. For the first time since arriving in this endless downpour, Evelyn felt less like a solitary echo and more like the storm itself, alive, seen, and tethered to something not entirely human, yet achingly close. And Aaron, the rain collector, the watcher of sorrow, was not just observing. He was participating, attuned to the cadence of her grief, yet warming the edges of it with something she didn't yet have a name for. The night stretched on, rain falling in rhythm around them until the city seemed to breathe with their proximity. Every touch, every glance, every shared silence built a tension that was neither hurried nor forced, yet electric enough to make the hair on her arms rise. When they finally parted that night, the rain resumed its normal cadence. The city lights softened, and Evelyn returned to her attic room with wet hair and a heart pounding quietly against her ribs. She knew without words that the storm was no longer hers alone, and that she would never forget the man who had shown her how sorrow could be held, and perhaps, in time, shared. The rain had never seemed so loud. Evelyn woke to the soft drumming against her window, a persistent rhythm that made the air feel charged, alive. She had dreamed of silver eyes and whispered words, of a touch that had lingered on her cheek longer than memory should allow. And somewhere deep inside, she knew it wasn't just a dream. Drawn by instinct, she slipped into her coat and moved through the mist-drenched streets. The city felt different at this hour, and the fog curling around street lamps like smoke, the usual crowd absent, leaving only the sound of her footsteps and the rain's steady pulse. She found him on the rooftop again, standing as if he had always belonged there, framed by the glimmering skyline. Arin Solus turned at the sound of her approach, silver eyes catching the dim light. For a moment, neither spoke, letting the rain carry their shared silence. "You came," he said softly, his voice blending with the storm. "I couldn't stay away," she admitted, her words almost lost to the wind. He stepped closer, and the world seemed to respond. Raindrops slowed, swirling gently around them, brushing against skin in a tender embrace. Every step he took drew her nearer, the space between them charged with anticipation, neither fully understood nor resisted. "Your storm," he murmured, his hand hovering near hers. "It frightens some, but it calls me." Evelyn felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. Her fingers twitched toward his, hesitant, testing the magnetic pull that had drawn her across rooftops and fog. When their hands brushed, the rain paused again, hanging in the air like suspended crystal. The pause stretched, intimate and electric, and she realized with a sharp thrill that every heartbeat, every breath between them was mirrored in the world around them. Even the storm obeyed their unspoken rhythm. "I've never," she began faltering, "felt this way." "Nor I," he admitted, stepping closer until their shoulders brushed. Warmth radiated from him in contrast to the cool drizzle, a subtle, insistent heat that pressed against her senses. "But the storm has a way of revealing truths," he said, his hand finally resting near hers. The space so small she could feel his pulse. The city below seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them on the rooftop, the rain falling in delicate arcs, wrapping them in a private world. Her breath caught as he moved his fingers, brushing one stray lock of damp hair from her face. The contact, simple yet deliberate, sent ripples through her, echoing in the paused droplets around them. "I don't know if I can control it," she whispered, her gaze tracing the line of his jaw, the shimmer of silver in his eyes. "Then let it guide you," he said, voice husky, intimate. "Not everything needs to be tamed." For a long moment the storm held its breath with them. The world felt fragile and infinite all at once. Every drop of rain a heartbeat suspended between desire and fear. Evelyn's hand trembled as it hovered near his, and then, finally, she let it brush against his. The sparks were immediate, subtle yet undeniable, as if the rain itself had ignited along the edges of her skin. "You feel it too," she breathed. "I do," he admitted, a faint smile tugging at his lips. It's been waiting for us. The rain resumed, gentle and intimate, wrapping them in a soft embrace. And on that rooftop, beneath the persistent downpour of a city that never slept, Evelyn and Aaron felt the first real stirrings of a storm that belonged to neither sky nor soul alone, but to them both. The city's rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, yet the night itself felt heavy with unspoken truths. Evelyn followed Aaron through narrow alleyways and hidden courtyards, the damp stone beneath her boots reflecting the occasional lamplight like scattered stars. Each step felt suspended in time, each breath tinged with the scent of wet earth and inevitability. They reached a small courtyard tucked between two ancient buildings. A fountain gurgled quietly, its water shimmering in the dim glow, but tonight, even it seemed to hold its breath. Aaron paused, turning to face her, silver eyes luminous even in the fog, studied her with an intensity that made her pulse thrum in her chest. "There's something you should know," he said softly, stepping closer. The air between them felt electric, thick with anticipation. "About me, about why I am drawn to storms like yours." Evelyn's heart skipped. "I'm listening," she whispered. Aaron lowered his gaze to the fountain. "I collect sorrow," he admitted. "Not in the way you might imagine. I don't take it to destroy it or to consume it. I take it because it must be carried, or it will drown the world." His voice was steady, almost gentle, but carried a depth of something ancient, something unavoidable. Evelyn swallowed. "And my storm. It's different," he said, lifting his gaze to meet hers. "It's not just grief. It's longing and loss and something raw, pure, unguarded. It called to me the moment you arrived." She stepped closer, drawn as much by the sincerity in his voice as by the warmth radiating from him. "Why me?" "Because you never tried to hide it," he replied. "Your sorrow isn't a mask. It's the storm itself, and it's beautiful." Evelyn's breath caught, a flush warming her cheeks despite the cool night air. She wanted to step back, wanted to resist the pull, but she couldn't. Not when the world seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the sound of the fountain, the soft drizzle and the undeniable tensions coiling like a live wire between them. He reached out, fingertips grazing her wrist. The touch was light, almost casual, but it sent a shiver up her arm, electric and intimate. The rain around them seemed to respond, slowing, pausing, as if even the storm wanted to witness this moment. "I've followed storms for years," he said, voice barely above the hum of falling water. "I've felt sorrow in every shape, but yours feels alive. It speaks. It recognizes me." Evelyn's hand found his, fingers brushing lightly. The world seemed to tilt, the drizzle settling into a soft, rhythmic dance around them. "Recognizes you," she echoed, the words trembling in her throat. Yes, he whispered, and I'm drawn to it. To you. The tension that had been simmering between them for nights on rooftops and quiet courtyards became undeniable now, magnetic and slow burning. His other hand moved to her cheek, brushing away a stray lock of wet hair, and the rain paused once more. Droplets hovered mid-air, trembling like tiny jewels around them, the city holding its breath. Evelyn's lips parted slightly, heart hammering, but her voice barely rose above a whisper. I don't know what this is. Neither do I, Aaron admitted, the honesty in his gaze grounding her, but it's ours. For this night at least, and the storm will tell us what comes next. Time seemed to bend. Every glance, every shiver of movement, every whisper of rain against skin, pressed them closer to the edge of something they had both been waiting for without realizing it. Their hands remained lightly intertwined, breaths mingling, hearts beating in quiet harmony with the world's pulse. And in that courtyard, under the soft fall of suspended rain, Evelyn felt it, the first real stirrings of trust, of surrender, of a connection that went beyond storms or sorrow. It was a slow, deliberate intimacy, one that didn't need words to define it. Arn's fingers lingered against her skin, the faint warmth spreading like wildfire, and she realized, with a quiet ache of both fear and longing, that she wanted more than just the comfort of his presence. She wanted the storm to carry them both. The night deepened, the rain whispered, and the two of them stood, bound by more than curiosity or coincidence. They were tethered by the storm, by sorrow, by something electric that neither could name yet, but both knew would not be easily forgotten. The city glowed softly beneath the fog, the lights blurred into halos in the persistent drizzle. Evelyn moved silently across the rooftops, following the familiar path Aaron had shown her, each step cautious yet drawn by a magnetism she couldn't resist. The air smelled of wet stone and ozone, alive with the electricity that had begun to hum between them. Aaron waited at the edge of the tallest roof, silhouette sharp against the shimmering skyline. His silver eyes caught hers as she approached, and the rain around him slowed, droplets hovering as though reluctant to fall. The world seemed to hold its breath with them, the hum of the storm a quiet, intimate symphony. You came, he said, voice low, the words curling around her like a touch. I had to, she whispered, heart thrumming in her chest. I can't stop thinking about... She faltered, unsure how to voice the strange pull she felt toward him, toward the storm that followed her everywhere. Aaron stepped closer, the space between them shrinking with each heartbeat. The warmth radiating from him was a stark contrast to the cool drizzle brushing her skin. You don't need to say it, he murmured. The storm already knows. Their hands brushed lightly, fingers grazing, and the air thickened with electricity. The rain paused, suspended around them in delicate arcs like the world itself was watching. Evelyn felt a shiver ripple through her, a mixture of fear, anticipation, and something deeper, unnamed. "I've never felt anything like this," she admitted, voice barely audible over the soft patter of droplets. "Nor have I," Aaron said, stepping so close that their shoulders touched. The warmth radiating from him pressed against her, grounding yet intoxicating. "But the storm, it tells us what we cannot yet say." Evelyn's breath caught. She could feel the pull between them, subtle yet undeniable, like the quiet draw of tide to moon. His hand lingered near hers, brushing along her wrist, teasing, tentative. And the world seemed to bend around that touch. Droplets shimmered, frozen mid-air, reflecting the city lights like tiny sparks. "Don't stop," she whispered, almost to herself. "Stop," he echoed softly, his gaze tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her cheek. "I don't know if I could, even if I wanted to." The pause stretched, electric and intimate, as if the storm itself were holding its breath. And then, gently, deliberately, his fingers brushed hers, intertwining. The simple contact sent a thrill up her arm, and she felt the storm pulse with her heartbeat. Evelyn's lips parted slightly, the cool mist clinging to her skin, and she realized with startling clarity how close they were. Bodies nearly touching, breaths mingling, hearts racing in silent tandem. The city below seemed to fade into fog and light, leaving only them and the soft, shimmering rain. "You feel it too," she murmured, trembling slightly. "Yes," he admitted, voice intimate. "The storm has led us here. It always does. And now, so have we." The air thickened with tension, heavy with possibility, yet tempered by the gentle rhythm of the rain. Every glance, every brush of skin, every suspended droplet seemed to carry intention, delicate, patient, electric. For a moment, Evelyn let herself surrender to the sensation, to the intimacy of presence, to the undeniable pull between them. She leaned slightly closer, drawn not only to him, but to the storm, to the quiet magic that bound them together. And Aaron, with silver eyes that seemed to reflect the world, and its hidden sorrow mirrored her. The rain, a silent witness to their slow, deliberate closeness. The city hummed below, the rain whispered around them, and for the first time Evelyn felt the storm not as a burden but as a conduit, a current connecting her to him, to something electric and inevitable. The night had thickened into velvet, pierced only by the occasional glow of distant city lights refracted through the rain. Evelyn wandered to the rooftop, where she and Aaron had first shared the suspended moments between storm and silence. Her heart still thrummed from the memory of their closeness, each step measured against the rhythm of falling droplets. He was already there, leaning casually against the railing, silver eyes catching the lamplight, the drizzle parting slightly around him. For a heartbeat, the world was just him, the rain, and the fragile tension of something unspoken. "You came," he said softly, voice low, as if sharing a secret with the night itself. "I couldn't stay away," she admitted, closing the distance. "I don't know how to stop thinking about this, about you." Arn's gaze softened. "Then don't." His hand reached out instinctively, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. The rain paused at the contact, droplets hanging in the air like suspended stars. Every touch carried electricity, subtle yet undeniable, stirring the storm around them. Evelyn shivered, both from the cool mist and the intensity of the closeness. Her hands trembled as they hovered near his, hesitant, yet drawn. I'm afraid," she whispered. "Afraid I'll lose control. Afraid the storm will overwhelm me, overwhelm us." "Then let it," he replied gently, stepping closer until their shoulders brushed. "We'll face it together. I'm not here to tame your storm. I'm here to feel it with you." Her breath caught. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly let go, leaning into the warmth of his presence. "I've never let anyone see this side of me," she admitted. "The sorrow, the longing." Arn's fingers found hers, entwining slowly, deliberately. "And I've never felt a storm like yours. It's not just grief. It's alive. It speaks. And I want to hear it, all of it, even the parts you fear." The rain around them deepened, soft and deliberate, wrapping them in a cocoon of mist and intimacy. Evelyn tilted her head, letting her forehead rest briefly against his chest, listening to the steady pulse beneath his coat. The storm mirrored the flutter of her heart, each drop a note in a symphony of shared vulnerability. "I don't want to be alone anymore," she whispered. "Nor I," he admitted, lowering his hand to gently cradle her cheek. The warmth of his palm against her skin sent a shiver through her, grounding yet thrilling, tender yet electric. "You don't have to be." The suspended silence stretched between them, broken only by the rain's soft patter, the whisper of wind through the rooftops. Slowly, deliberately, their hands moved together, fingertips grazing, palms brushing, building a connection that was both emotional and tactile. The storm responded, droplets hovering like shimmering witnesses to their closeness. Evelyn lifted her eyes to his, seeing not just the silver gleam of his gaze, but the quiet understanding, the shared recognition of sorrow and desire. She felt the tension in her chest shift, not as fear, but as longing, a raw, unspoken acknowledgement that this storm, this closeness, was theirs alone. Aaron leaned in slightly, the space between them so small it seemed to hum. "You don't need words," he murmured. "Let the storm speak." And in that moment, amidst suspended droplets and the softened roar of the city below, Evelyn did. She let herself feel it all. The grief, the yearning, the flicker of desire, and the storm answered back, carrying their confession, their surrender, their intimacy into the night. They stood together, hearts beating in quiet harmony with the rain, bound by sorrow, by storm, and by the delicate electric threads of trust that had begun to weave between them. The night stretched on, the city hushed, and Evelyn realized, with a quiet ache and a thrilling certainty, that this storm and this man would change everything. The rain had softened to a gentle murmur by morning, leaving the city glistening as though it had been washed clean. Evelyn stood at her window, watching the soft haze curl between rooftops. The night's confession still lingered, a slow pulse beneath her ribs that she could neither name nor ignore. Every drop that clung to the window pane seemed to echo the rhythm of her heartbeat, reminding her that she was no longer alone in the storm. Her thoughts drifted inevitably to Aaron. Silver eyes and whispered words haunted the spaces between reality and memory, and she realized how profoundly their closeness had already begun to reshape her. The storm outside mirrored the quiet within her, no longer violent, yet alive with a gentle, persistent tension. She dressed quietly and stepped into the streets, boots meeting wet cobblestones with a muted splash. The drizzle was soft, playful, brushing her hair and cheeks as if teasing her senses awake. She wandered through hidden alleyways and quiet courtyards, instinctively following the path that had led her to Aaron so many nights before. He was waiting on the familiar rooftop, framed by the pale light of the awakening city. His expression softened as he saw her, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips that sent a thrill curling through her. "You came," he said simply, the words warm against the cool morning. "I couldn't stay away," she admitted, stepping closer. Her fingers hovered near his, hesitant yet drawn by the magnetic pull that had grown stronger with every shared moment. Aaron extended a hand, letting her take it. The warmth of his touch was grounding, yet every nerve along her arm tingled with the memory of last night. The rain paused at their connection, droplets hanging in the air like tiny crystals. The city around them seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them, the soft patter of water and the quiet hum of tension that stretched taut between them. "Between storms," he murmured, his voice low and intimate, "is when we learn to listen to ourselves, to each other, to the quiet that comes after the chaos." Evelyn tilted her head, letting his words settle into her chest. She leaned slightly into him, feeling the subtle heat radiating from his body, the faint rhythm of his pulse beneath her fingertips. I want to understand, she whispered. I want to see what the storm sees, even if it scares me. Then let me show you, he replied, drawing her closer until their shoulders brushed. The sensation was electric but not rushed, deliberate, intimate. The drizzle swirled around them, soft and enveloping, as though granting them privacy in a world that never slept. They walked together through secret courtyards and abandoned rooftops, each step bringing them closer, each glance lingering a heartbeat longer. The tension between them was no longer tentative. It had become a shared current, subtle yet insistent, flowing through every brush of fingers, every pause of breath, every suspended droplet that trembled around them. At the edge of a high rooftop, Evelyn paused to look down at the streets glistening below. It feels different now, she murmured. The city, the rain, even me. Arn's hand lifted to rest lightly against her cheek, brushing away a stray strand of hair. The touch was gentle, intimate, sending warmth spiraling through her in a way that left her breathless. You've changed it, he said softly. Not the city, not the rain, but the storm itself. And it's beautiful. Her pulse quickened, awareness of him sharpening with every heartbeat. She met his gaze, silver reflecting silver, the storm around them quivering in quiet acknowledgement. In that suspended moment, Evelyn realized the depth of their connections, fragile, electric, and entirely theirs. They lingered there long after the drizzle returned to a gentle murmur, exploring the spaces between heartbeats and raindrops, learning the rhythm of shared silence. The storm had softened, yes, but it had not gone away. It had become a current running through them, a tether binding sorrow, desire, and trust into something delicate and unbreakable. And as Evelyn finally stepped back toward the stairwell, glancing once more at Aaron, she knew with a quiet certainty that the spaces between storms were just as powerful as the storms themselves. Moments that taught patience, intimacy, and the slow, exquisite unraveling of hearts in tandem. The city had grown still beneath a soft, silver dawn. The rain lingered light and delicate, weaving through the streets like silk over cobblestones. Evelyn stood at her window, watching the mist curl between rooftops, feeling the quiet heartbeat of a world that had shifted with her own. The storm no longer felt like an outside force to endure. It was part of her, and now part of them both. She turned, feeling a familiar warmth in the room before she even saw him. Aaron stepped into the soft morning light, his silver eyes reflecting the calm brilliance of the lingering drizzle. He moved with a quiet confidence, each step deliberate, intimate, as if the world itself bent slightly toward him. "You're awake early," she said, though her voice carried no reproach. "I wanted to see the storm with you," he replied softly, coming closer until the space between them was charged alive. I've felt it change since the first night, and you've taught it new rhythms. Evelyn smiled, brushing her fingers along the railing between them. The storm outside responded, droplets falling slower, swirling gently, attentive to their presence. She felt the warmth of his hand against hers and let their fingers intertwine naturally, easily. A quiet echo of every suspended moment they had shared. The storm feels ours, she whispered, like it waits for us now, like it listens. Aaron tilted his head, studying her with the intensity of someone who had seen the world's sorrow and still found beauty. It's because it does, he murmured. Because you let it, and because you let me. Her breath caught at the weight of that, at the intimacy of a truth unspoken until now. She stepped closer, letting the brush of his shoulder against hers ground her, and the world seemed to shift around them. The city, the fog, the gentle drizzle, all of it became a private stage for their connection. I trust you, she said, softly, fully, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. And I trust you, he replied, letting his hand rest lightly against her cheek. The warmth of his touch spread through her, tender yet electric, sending shivers that traced the line of her spine. The rain paused, droplets shimmering in the soft morning light, as though the storm itself was holding its breath for this moment. Evelyn leaned into him, letting the closeness take root, and Aaron matched her, their foreheads resting lightly together. The storm no longer demanded tears or sorrow. It pulsed gently, harmonized with the rhythm of their hearts. For long moments they stood like that, quiet, connected, letting the storm carry their shared trust, desire, and the slow, deliberate intimacy that had grown between them. Every raindrop seemed to echo their closeness, every whisper of wind brushing against their skin like a soft caress. Finally, Aaron's lips brushed hers, brief and delicate, yet electric. The rain flared around them, not with violence, but with luminous suspended beauty, droplets reflecting the light of a world that had softened to mirror their harmony. Evelyn's hands traced the line of his shoulders, the warmth of him grounding her, even as the thrill of the storm surged around them. The city beyond the rooftops faded into mist and shimmer. There was no past heartbreak, no lingering sorrow, only the storm they had shaped together, only the quiet, perfect rhythm of two hearts attuned to each other. When they finally pulled back slightly, foreheads still touching, the soft laughter of shared understanding escaped them both. "It's ours," Evelyn murmured, a smile lifting her lips. Aaron's silver eyes gleamed with the same quiet joy, the same wonder she felt in her chest. "Always," he whispered, "yours and mine, storm and soul, together." The rain resumed its gentle murmur, a lullaby for a city that never slept. And on that rooftop, amidst mist, silver light, and the lingering heartbeat of the storm, Evelyn and Aaron stood hand in hand, tethered not by sorrow or fear, but by trust, desire, and a storm finally in perfect harmony. The sky above shimmered softly, acknowledging them, and the city seemed to sigh, as if the world itself had found peace. And for the first time, Evelyn Rain let herself smile fully, letting the storm fall around her, not as grief, but as a celebration of what had been found in its quiet, electric heart. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's story. Good night and sweet dreams.